Welcome back to another episode of Rooted in Movement, the podcast. This is going to be part 2 of our short little mini series here on pelvic floor health. And today we are going to be focusing specifically on you men. Yes, you dudes out there who don't get a lot of love when it comes to pelvic floor health. So the intention behind today's episode is just to shed some light on a lot of the common issues that most men do experience when it comes to their pelvic floor health and sexual performance, and then a lot of the stigmas that we associate with pelvic floor health and why a lot of men don't seek out the help that they truly do need, because there's something that you need to consider here, right? What happens when your family jewels aren't feeling good or functioning properly for that matter? Do you even know what functioning properly even means? Do you feel like your manhood is at stake when there's something wrong down below? Do you talk to other dudes about your problems in the locker room? Have you ever expressed these concerns with your partner for that matter? Or do you even seek professional help when it becomes necessary? Or are you afraid that you're going to find something that's actually wrong with your tool and you really don't want to even face that fear? I found out that there is actually something going on with manhood down below, because what's crazy is that across the world, 50% of men will experience pelvic pain at some point in their lives. And, beyond this, 74% of men will actually experience ejaculatory pain. Yeah. You heard that right. Pain when your gun goes off, right? And that's either, of course, having a niche in the shooting community here as a tactical physical therapist. I just had to put that little pun in there. Why not? Because when your gun goes off, whether it's intentionally from pulling the trigger or from a misfire, if there's pain associated with that, that could be a problem, right? So just because this is common, like you see these percentages, these numbers, there is a large amount of men that actually experience this around the world. But just because this is a common issue, it doesn't mean that it's normal. And the solution to this overwhelming problem is actually threefold. And that's what we're going to be going over here today. Number one, we have to bring awareness and understanding through education. That's what I hope to deliver to you all here with this podcast, is to give you just like a little tip, just a tip of the iceberg, just to kind of feel what it's all about and see if it resonates with you, so you can gain a better understanding around what is actually happening down below. Number two is acknowledgement. So acknowledgement that there is actually, or there could potentially be a problem affecting your sexual health. And then finally, number three is taking action. And taking action through embodiment practices that get to the source of the problem rather than relying on a little blue pill for the rest of your life. Nobody wants to go down that path whatsoever. And what you're going to find out is that a lot of these solutions are going to come down to your mind and also your breath. So here's a newsflash for you all. For all you guys out there, if you didn't know it already, you guys have pelvic floors too, right? And I'm here to tell you that you won't lose your man card for seeking help when there's something peculiar going on with your own. Okay. And there's nothing to be ashamed of here. There's no guilt. There's no shame around this. What if I told you, though, that if improving your performance of your pelvic floor, it will not only garner you better results in the gym, but also make you a more powerful lover with your partner? Would you actually listen to me then, right? So it can enhance your performance in the gym. We can get bigger, faster, stronger, more powerful, and then also enhance your lovemaking with your partner. And that's, I think, two things that are extremely important and valuable to most men, especially the latter. We use the gym to find the girl, but then when we get the girl, we want to make sure that we actually perform well enough to keep her in a loving way. And there's more than just the mechanics to this, as you're going to find out. So that being said, this isn't really a sales pitch really about magically taking you from zero to hero or promoting your wedding tackle from soldier to sex god. My goal today through this podcast is to educate you about how your daily lifestyle choices, so your lifestyle choices, your habits, and where you associate inside your environment that could be contributing to potential pelvic pain and dysfunction. And then to provide you with some much needed education regarding how the psychology and the mindset can bring conscious awareness back to your body. And it's this conscious awareness that's going to help you get through this sticking point. Okay. So how can we begin to fix a problem though, if we don't talk about it? And this is where the social awareness piece is going to come in. So across the board, there is actually a lot of limited communication about the pelvic floor amongst men, right? It sure as hell isn't something that we typically feel comfortable discussing in the locker room, like we mentioned before. And this all stems from the social taboos that were created around the male genital system, okay? Men are typically afraid or embarrassed, for that matter, as to be seen as weak, right, amongst their male peers if something is wrong with their unit. We won't talk to our friends about it. We rarely go to a doctor, and we sure as hell won't we won't bring this up to our partner. There's an embarrassment factor here. In fact, we are even terrible at expressing our basic emotions to our partners and to actually other people who are close to us as well, because these feelings are typically seen as a weakness in our culture. Men don't cry, right? We're macho. So we push our emotions down and try and forget about them. That's not what men are supposed to be doing. And that's what society has told us is supposed to be what men do, is we are emotionless. We're stoic, right? This tends, though, to build resentment amongst couples who begin making up stories in their own head with really no outward evidence as an attempt to take a wild guess at what their partner is feeling, right? And I'm going to speak from personal experience here. Like, whenever I used to feel an emotion of sadness or depression or grief, I would push that shit down. And a lot of times I would push that shit down so far for so long that it would get expressed as very violent anger at some point. Like, you ever hear people, having a fuse, and then some people have a short fuse, but other times people let that go for so long that then they just explode and blow their lid. Yeah, that's exactly what I would do, because I'd be making up these stories in my own head about how other people were perceiving me and how other people were making me feel. And when we make up these stories in our head for so long, they become a reality, right? Despite the fact that perceptually they may not even be true. And eventually, after telling ourselves enough times, these stories really do become a reality, and that often leads to the demise of many relationships, both platonic and romantic. Okay, so this break in communication leads to resentment. That's the key piece here. It leads to resentment and often a dissolution of many of our relationships, because we just aren't willing to talk about what's going on, one, in our head, but two, how we're feeling inside of our body. And I actually grew up in the backwoods of Pennsylvania, but I also grew up in a very Roman Catholic family, right? And I grew up where the Roman Catholic teachings, and the dogma for that matter, served as the foundation for how we were supposed to hold ourselves in society. So if you think about it, even the Catholic Church has taught us that if we masturbate, we're going to go straight to hell, right? Or you're going to go blind. I remember my grandmother telling me that one too. What little boy ever follows that dogma? Think about that. If you're a little boy and you're listening to this, what did you do? We snuck up to our room to rub one out before mom caught us. That was typically the MO, because we were repressing these innate urges for pleasure. And we did that. We were teaching our brain that in order to orgasm, or in order to experience pleasure, we must do it quickly. We need to release that sexual energy, that sexual tension, as quickly as possible. So it's no wonder why the average time that a man can actually last in bed is only 3 minutes. And that's validated literature. Obviously, there are some extremes of going above that, but you think about going below, 30 seconds is, or maybe even 10 seconds is probably the lower end of that spectrum. That's not fun for anybody, right? This is not an environment where you want speed to be king. But what happens is we start ingraining that in our nervous system, right? You think about how we go about our day with our movement patterns, or how we move in the gym for that matter. That's ingraining a certain set of movement skills into our body. Right, it ingrains these adaptations. So physical adaptations of like growing bigger muscles, right, or bone density, or ligament strength. But then also from a nervous system standpoint, you hear people becoming like muscle bound or meatheads, right? They don't move athletically very well because that's not what they were training for. Right, specificity is key here. So even from a sexuality standpoint, if we start ingraining these patterns from an early age as children, how could we expect anything different when we become adults, right? So now we have young boys who ingrain this come quickly nervous system pattern into our body. And then we start engaging in sexual relationships with a partner later on in life, and we don't understand why we can't last longer in bed. right? Everybody thinks back to that scene from American Pie where it happened twice in one time with Nadia, right? That's very, very common. That isn't too far off from the truth with the storyline there. And it's because of these patterns that we developed as children. So now we get into these adult relationships. And what ends up happening is we can't last long in bed. So now we beat ourselves up and we create a lot of performance anxiety and stress over the situation. Okay. In that moment, we are no longer in our body, we're in our head. And when we're in our head and we're thinking about performing well, you can't perform well because you're not connected to your partner. You're not aware of their breath. You're not aware of the signals that he or she is giving you. And in that moment, your nervous system's like, shit, let's go back to our old patterns that we know so well. And let's just end this real quick so we can get that quick little burst of relief and call it good. And maybe go to sleep or go watch a movie and move on with life, right? So it's one of those things where in order to correct these long ingrained patterns, we're going to have to start to flip the switch. We're going to have to start to turn the Titanic, so to speak, and start pivoting and start changing the way that we view ourselves, number one, from a confidence standpoint, but then two, start changing our nervous system. And we can't do this through the means of just regular masturbation. We have to look at this more from the realms of self-pleasure and learning how to find that edge and then use our breath to actually control where we're at from a pleasure standpoint and learn what that feels like and actually feel into our body so that we then can translate that over into a sexual experience with our partners. And there's way too much detail to go into on those side of things from a technique standpoint in a podcast as well. So maybe that's something we'll put a video series together on and you guys can check that out later. So this is kind of where, from a medical standpoint, though, we start diagnosing conditions such as like erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation and stress-induced performance anxiety. We see all these different labels that we then associate with this common sensation of the nervous system pattern that we've ingrained from a childhood, right? So the common thread amongst all these, though, is the stress component, right? We created the nervous system stress and we ingrained these patterns so that and this is why many of our sexual and pelvic health problems are really a product of our environment and not our physiology. The cool part about that, though, is that we have control over it, right? We can start to change that should we want to make the conscious choice to shift our lifestyle and behavior patterns up. Okay. So here comes the awareness piece, right? There are negative aspects of load. There are negative aspects of stress. Physiological, psychological, and emotional stressors impact our body on so many different levels. People become numb to them because of the idea that, in my world of entrepreneurship and owning my own business, that being busy equals success. However, we shouldn't use progress as an indicator for productivity. We get caught up in this creating wealth, creating power, creating prestige, all at the expense of our own health. Okay, literally draining our energy. So then it's not surprising that our relationships and sex drive are going to suffer. They're going to take a back seat to other priorities that we have. Now, I think there's a time and a place for all this stuff. Like when we're in that warrior energy and we want to focus on our mission, focus on our purpose, focus on our legacy. But there has to become a time where we do make it a priority for self-care and for our relationships as well. So having an awareness around recognizing how you spend your time is going to help you prioritize the things in your life that will actually rejuvenate your energy and keep you focused on optimal productivity. Because really, when it comes down to it, stress is literally killing your boner, guys. It is, right? So excessive stimulation in the form of, being around other people in a business setting or in the form of the cell phones and social media and the TV and the computer screens, they kill libido and they kill romance. So I guess a big pro tip here would be to remove the TV from your bedroom altogether. We don't even have one. We have one television inside of our house and we don't even have cable. We just have Netflix and HBO when we do want to go watch a movie, and we actually set an intention behind it of devoting that time to just relaxing and turning our brains off. But in reality, if too much stimulation via these external means, especially with screens, it's going to make you antisocial, right? It's going to decrease your ability to make human connections. It's essentially where that comes down to. So how can you then focus on, the beautiful woman lying next to you, the beautiful man lying next to you, if there is a distraction of a movie or another episode of Friends playing in the background, right? Instead, you need to learn to feel your partner and not just with your hands, right? So in order to be present, your mind needs to be clear from distractions. This is going to allow you to, in a sense, like sense the subtleties, right? Sense the subtleties of how she is feeling, how she is reacting to your moves, and gain insight into her thoughts and her feelings and truly connect with her soul. And when this happens, this is when your woman will begin to trust you again and open her heart. And the more her heart opens, the greater the intimacy and the greater the pleasure that's going to be created. And the TV really, it isn't the only source of our problems. Our bodies experience emotional triggers from all the synthetic stimulation in our environment, from the phones and the iPads to computers. We're actually bombarded with it daily. And these stimuli from these different devices triggers a release of hormones. And these specific type of hormones have a very catabolic effect in our body. So one of these is going to be cortisol, right? Cortisol has a very catabolic effect. It causes a sympathetic fight or flight stress response that, when left to go on for too long, can have negative ramifications for not just your physical body, but also your nervous system. So these stress chemicals then going to interfere with internal rhythms that we have, like your digestive process and your wake sleep cycles, your cognitive processing, as well as promoting systemic inflammation. And the increase in this inflammatory milieu, or this chemical soup of messengers, wakes up old aches and pains via your brain's memory bank. Okay, this is why past painful situations or sexual experiences that can be, physical or emotional experiences in the form of abuse or physical trauma or embarrassment, for that matter, can dig up formerly repressed memories, leading to manifestations of things like testicular pain and groin pain, erectile dysfunction, and really is the source of most performance anxiety. Because I might have mentioned this before in a previous podcast, but our nervous system is actually made up of 70% immune cells, right? So if you, let's just say, get a vaccine, you get a small little amount of the virus or the bacterial particles injected into your body, so your body can mount the appropriate immune response and fight it, and then develop antibodies so that when you come in contact with it later, it remembers it and can mount the appropriate response so you don't get sick. Well, the same thing happens in our nervous system, right? So if you have an embarrassing moment or an embarrassing sexual experience, that literally gets burned into your brain. It gets burned into your nervous system via these immune cells, and your brain remembers it. So the next time that you go into a sexual experience, that's literally all it can think about, right? And if that embarrassing moment was associated with some type of pelvic pain or pain with ejaculation, it will trigger that same response from time to time. Okay. So it's really no wonder why we call chronically stressed out people anal. I think there's a pun in there somewhere, right? When we burn the candles at both ends, we become very wired and tired, right? And many men end up holding that tension in their pelvic floor. If you've never, really recognized that as a possibility, though, how could you ever start the process of letting it go, right? If you don't notice that your pelvic floor is tight and holding your stress, you have no reason to believe that you can ever try and start to fix it, right? Instead, you stay in this kind of holding pattern where you're literally like white knuckling with your pelvic floor muscles every single day. And this could potentially in and of itself lead to altered function and restriction around very important blood vessels and nerves that supply your manhood, right? And supply your genitalia, both the penis and the testicles, okay? So I want you to think back to being a kid and playing around with a garden hose. Have you ever had a kink in that garden hose? What happens when you have a kink in that garden hose, right? The pressure drops. There's no flow. And the whole system becomes flaccid. So sure, you could unkink the hose with a little blue pill, but it's just putting a Band-Aid over the problem, and it's only a temporary solution. So your body and your mind, they're so intimately connected. And we talk about this so many times. And your emotions and your attitude towards life are going to affect this muscular tension in and around that hose, and it's going to affect your ability to relax. Okay. So overloading the stress response means that you're really not going to have any energy left for sex or to have a sex drive whatsoever. Libido is going to decrease, which is literally going to be kinking that hose of yours. Okay. The body and the brain has a priority list. Safety and security ranks highest on this list. And safety and security comes in the form of food, sleep, and feeling protected and feeling safe, right? So if we don't have these three things, if we don't have enough adequate nutrition, if we don't have enough adequate sleep, I'd even add in there, if we don't have a purpose in life, we don't have a mission or a legacy that we want to leave, a reason to live, right? Or something that gives us energy and gets us up every morning to take a crack at our day, you're not going to devote any energy to sex, right? And you add in the stress of training and banging weights for that matter, which is going to add now the physical load to the body. Your brain will literally decommission your cock in order to preserve energy. That's the least of its worries. Procreation, which is the reason why we have sex, from an evolutionary standpoint, it's not high in that priority list anymore. You have to get everything else in place first, and then that will optimize your sexual performance because now we can devote some energy to it, right? This is where rest comes in, okay? So rest allows you to enter a parasympathetic state. It's really a sacred time for winding down and for optimal growth and repair cycles to run their course. So, for example, rest is vitally important for building testosterone in men. So before you run to your doc for some testosterone shots, you might want to try prioritizing your sleep first. But I see so many people who go down this route, especially in the tactical world and within fire and LEO and military. This is a very common demographic where we go right to these exogenous testosterone injections to combat the lifestyle, right? And that's a tricky subject. That's a tricky demographic of people to have to work with because of the roles and responsibilities that they have to perform every single day, which does include lacking a lot of sleep, okay? So when we can get your body into more of a relaxed state where the body seeks balance, this is where we're going to start to repair. This is where we're going to start to reprioritize our energy. Okay. So essentially you need to ride the wave of relaxation, which is going to bring the body and the mind back to a level of a baseline in order for you to reach optimal performance in other sympathetic activities like sex. So I just want to kind of reiterate something here. We need to keep our body in this parasympathetic state like 90% of the time, so that we can have the energy for sympathetic activities, which are necessary, right? So the sympathetic nervous system isn't bad. This fight or flight, it's part of our biology. It's part of our physiology. We need it to be humans, but we also need to optimize it as well. So different sympathetic activities could be going out and playing your favorite sport, or going and crushing a workout in the gym, or having sex. These are all very much labeled as sympathetic activities, okay? So when your body has had ample time to rest and recover, then you can learn to enjoy the process, which is going to be the most important piece of this. When the body isn't relaxed and you are focusing on the end goal of orgasm, for example, with sex, you will literally blow your wad too quickly. Okay. This reinforces that motor program of essentially pump and dump that you learned as a child, because you are in this heightened sympathetic state. Your body has not recovered enough in the parasympathetic state to allow you to function optimally in the sympathetic state. So your brain is trying to get you out of that sympathetic state as quickly as possible. And it knows that if you release that energy quickly, you have a better chance of going back into a parasympathetic state, which is why we feel so tired after sex typically, okay? Or after ejaculation. It also sets up the preconceived expectation of performance that we talked about earlier. If it's going to be end goal oriented, okay? Instead, we should be focusing on the process, because what you're actually feeling in the moment of pleasure is the ultimate end goal. When you relax, you're going to feel more. You're going to feel more connected and present with your partner, so that when you initiate something like sex, you can both fully experience the highest levels of pleasure instead of focusing on the mechanical aspects of it. Okay. So here's what we need to do to relax in order to reload. So if you want your pelvic floor to function at an optimal level for optimal health, and if you want to live in your most productive state of being, in your most connected life with yourself and your partner and everyone else around you that you interact with on a daily basis, you need to start taking an inventory of your thoughts, your feelings, and social perspectives. How do you feel? Where are you holding on to tension? What is stressing you out? How long do you last in bed? Be honest with yourself. How intimately connected would your partner think the two of you actually are? How energized do you feel on a daily basis? When you can recognize and acknowledge that you're feeling overworked and overstressed and overwhelmed and overstimulated and not in a good way, then you can actually prioritize your life to what matters most. You want to function at optimal potential in the gym, at work, and in bed. So I want you to take some time to rest, get some sleep, and focus on the people that you care about most. And yourself, you, the I, is actually included in this. We need to focus on ourselves first so that we have the energy to have, adequate relationships with others and in society. So we have one more of these podcasts coming out here. So we have one more in this series of pelvic floor health, and we're going to stay focused on the men for this last part as well. So in the final podcast, which will be coming out next week, this final podcast in the series of pelvic floor health and sexual health, I'm actually going to be giving you actionable steps to improve your pelvic health and enhance your sexual performance. So I really want you to stay tuned for next week's episode. But in the meantime, if you found this information valuable, please go ahead and leave a 5-star review. Tell your friends about it. Would truly, truly appreciate it. And as always, I really am grateful that you take the time to listen to this and take the information to heart. And for all of you that send me all the the positive feedback of how it's helped bring value to your life, I truly, truly appreciate that as well. It helps give me energy and give me purpose to keep putting these episodes out there to help us all moving better in a different direction. I am Thor.